guys, it's Barb with Inspire Me 360, and it's Saturday night, and I'm finally going to make this video. It's probably one of the most important videos I think I will ever make, especially pertaining to the state of the world right now. And in this particular video, I want to talk about over-identification with the body. And I will get into what I mean, and I'll use lots of examples in terms of teaching this, but it also comes from A Course in Miracles. Not everything that I'm teaching in this particular video series is going to be right from the Course in Miracles, but there'll be a lot of similarities for anybody that has ever read the book. So basically, before any of us, so if you think back to childhood, before any of us ever perceived having a body in a really concrete way, we just existed experientially. What I mean by this is that we were just having experiences, living in joy, living also by the necessity of survival. You know, are we hungry? Are we tired? Those things that our parents, hopefully we had parents that cared for us in this way, provided to us, but there wasn't a lot of thought specifically in the analysis of having a body, or the perception from which a lot of our adulthood analysis is sort of filtered through. And this really trickles back, or is very highly related to the egoic mind and how the ego lens works. So basically, I'm going to go back to an example in my childhood, two examples in terms of teaching this type of perception. So I can remember the exact day. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I was at my aunt's farm, and I had really never considered myself that much in terms of like a separate beingness. I mean, I loved interacting, I loved life, I was a very inquisitive, curious child, but there was a specific moment that it was kind of almost like a lightning strike. And I remember that I was in the bathroom at my aunt's farmhouse, and I was playing with her makeup. I put on some lipstick and some mascara, and I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, wow, I'm beautiful. Not like in an overly superficial way, like not in a way where I was full of myself. It was just like a realization, wow, I'm in this body, and this body is beautiful. And I remember staring at the mirror for quite a long time and just thinking, really, this is really interesting. I never conceived of myself in this way. I've never looked in the mirror in this way. I mean, I remember mom and dad asking me to brush my teeth, and I remember, being diligent with brushing my teeth, watching that I was brushing my teeth properly, but it was still myself objectively focused on the object and what I was doing, not ever really on the separate self. And in that moment, I also became focused on the separate self, in that realization of this body is kind of magnificent and beautiful. When I had that realization, I was almost kind of caught up in it. I remember all of my aunt's makeup being laid out and really putting it all on, and just being very fascinated with the whole progression of, wow, this is the body that I'm in. And then here's another side of it. I remember also, probably maybe a year later, going to a public pool. I was there with my dad, and you're little, you're still kind of chubby, you have your baby fat. And I remember all of these boys from my school, and specifically they're kind of picking on me in the pool. And this one boy came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you are so ugly." And kept sort of saying that. And then they were coming up with different little things and splashing water and whatnot. And then it was the first time that I ever really conceived of like the antithesis to this, having this lovely body that I was very excited to be occupying. Contemplative analysis started within my own egoic self or my egoic perception. And this is really the point where I started to understand that I was a separate self, and that, again, I was not attached to any other, that I could only really perceive through my own little isolated vehicle, but then also that the entire world was always judging this body. And of course, what the body does, if you're good at dancing, if you are a good student, if you are a good daughter, all of these different things, if you're a worthy friend. But I started to really realize through the mechanism of this separateness, through the understanding that I had a body, and some are going to perceive it as beautiful and some are going to perceive it as ugly, and there is this total contemplative aspect to this, that I the self am continually going to have to be in this contemplation, going to have to be in this analysis, and also that because of the world that we live in, I'm also going to be under a lot of scrutiny and judgment. And those two events in my childhood, really, again, I can look at them as really seed events within my own consciousness. And this is, when I have read A Course in Miracles, when I've read, the myriad of wonderful spiritual, philosophical books that I've read, there's really this, what you would call Christ consciousness, okay? And that's something that, again, it's easily attained, but it's not easily attained once we start seeing the world or perceiving the world through the lens of the ego, whether it's our ego or other egos or all of them in the mix. And then there is what you could term the Antichrist, or that which is not Christ consciousness, which again, it's I've kind of made a list in terms of teaching this consciousness principle correctly. Okay, so when we are thinking in an undistorted fashion, we would be thinking of love, okay? We would only perceive love. So we would only perceive the fact that we are loved, okay? When we look through the distorted or the separation aspect that the ego provides, this is when we start the analysis of, we are unloved. Are we loved? All of the questions come out, all of the doubts, all of the fears. This is essentially the point of no return where fear is born, okay? In Christ consciousness, we are all worthy. Once we move into that distorted arena of the ego, we start to feel lack, we start to feel unworthy, we start to question our worth, we start to judge the worth of others, okay? And again, that is through the lens of egoic analysis. Safety. When we are in Christ consciousness, we don't even question safety, because we are perfectly safe in all things. And a good way to teach this is remembering back to when you were a child, where you didn't even perceive unsafety. Like, you just felt safe. You just had this, it just wasn't a concept in your mind. And then, as we start to see and filter the world through the lens of the ego, we feel very fearful, we feel unsafe, we recognize that there are things like atomic bombs and wars and all of these different things that, again, man has created that are, terribly scary, okay? In control. This is another one that I love. In terms of Christ consciousness, we don't even have to think of being in control, because everything is in balance. However, the ego's greatest fear is being out of control, not knowing how to control itself. It doesn't feel like it's powerful, so therefore it has to exert power and control over others. Okay, so again, it is the opposite of this safe, all-pervading conscious state that, again, is oneness. The next thing that the ego will really present us with is life. Well, the Christ consciousness is life, okay? Everything is eternal life through the lens of Christ consciousness. When we move into the way that the ego thinks, we perceive death. So we perceive an ending. Another way to look at this is I exist, and the fear, so that is the distorted version, is I will cease to exist. And again, another incidents in my childhood where I remember the exact moment where I conceived the fact that I may never exist again. I was in Vancouver, I was in a hotel room, I was very young with my mother and my sister, and I remember laying down to bed and thinking about what it would be like to be dead and to have nothing about me ever exist, and everything that had happened up to my death be instantly erased by death itself, and that I would become nothingness. I would just disintegrate. And that thought, I remember having a panic attack that night and thinking over and over and over again, this pervasive thought of just not existing. And now looking back, I realize that that is an absolute untruth. But I had to understand the absolute fear of that thought to be able to have the experiences that I've had in life. So to go through the paranormal experiences, go through the awakening experiences, I had to know the opposite of it. And what that one conception through the lens of the ego mind, this pervasive, all-encompassing fear of death, did was it created a string of panic attacks, basically, through my young adulthood and my teenage years. And it all really stemmed from this fear of dying and just really the contemplation, the analysis by my newly formed perception. So this perception I had of this separate body, this complete disconnection from spirit, because of course you cannot have those type of thoughts if you are one in spirit. You can't feel that. When you are one in spiritual consciousness or divine mind, you know, you have an absolute concrete knowledge that you are eternal, that what you are transcends material, time, space, all of it. And you don't just comprehend it, or it's not just an analysis, you experience it. It's a very visceral feeling. I can't put the feeling that you have into words. If you haven't had a spiritual awakening, it won't make a lot of sense to you. It didn't make a lot of sense to me until I had a spiritual awakening and I actually experienced what I was expanding out of my body and becoming everything, and then again contracting back. It was similar to a near-death experience, but I hadn't died. So, and it's happened to me many times. It wasn't an isolated event. Throughout my life, I've gone through this experience over and over and over again, and I don't always know where it's going to come from or when it's going to come, and it's certainly not drug induced, so that makes me feel a little bit better, and hopefully you as well. But it is a very profound experience, and once you have experienced something like this, there's no return. You know, from everything that you are, from every aspect of your beingness, that there is concretely 100% more to everything, the totality of existence, than what meets the eye or what the body can experience. So this is the lesson that I'm teaching, that we are not the body. You are not just the body. You have a body. It's a learning tool. It's a wonderful tool. But that is not all that you or I are. There is the body. And so I'm going to circle this back to the original reason that I'm making this video, is the over-identification with the body in our modern day. So many individuals are focused on the actual learning tool and not really the lesson. So they have become so wrapped up in the container, so what it looks like, keeping it fit, making sure that it's not aging, making sure that we're taking, unlimited videos and photos of this body, and the body has become the center of our worship, so to speak. And I mean, some of these words are very dated, and I don't mean, worship, but in a sense, it's what we focus. All worship really means is that we're elevating it, and we're focusing a lot of our attention on it. And sometimes all of our attention on this body thing, okay? And whether that is, again, social media, continually looking at a little screen and looking at what's visual. And yes, you can learn from those things. It's great. It's applicable in certain regard to be able to look at YouTube or to listen to a podcast, scroll on Facebook. There is some good content on there, but most of it's junk. Most of it is mindless. You're not utilizing the mind in its full capability. And the mind and our consciousness is the most beautiful gift that we have. Now, it is streaming through this body, and this body is able to experience things, all sorts of things. And because of that three-dimensional, five-sensory experience, we learn in a very tactile way. We are really experiencing the lessons in a way that pure consciousness or pure soul cannot do in the same way, okay? So it is a beautiful experience to be in a body. It is a grand adventure to have this human suit, to be able to pop into it as a soul and experience everything that we are experiencing. Where the trouble comes is in the over-identification, the imbalance of what we're seeing pervade our societies, our cultures today. And that would be, people being so over focused on their bodies that they are going through massive amounts of plastic surgery, everything to do with what they're wearing and, whatever pictures they're taking of themselves. And instead of, friend groups having these dynamic, fun experiences and really deep interconnected conversations, they're taking selfies and they're more worried about what's on their Snapchat and, who's liking them and these kind of things that are such a distraction and are such a waste of time. But it's where we're at. That's where a lot of our planetary consciousness is at. It's highly superficial. It's highly over-identified with the lens of the body, or this egoic kind of centerpiece of our experience. And the other aspects of this as well is, again, over-identification with the body leads to things like hypersexualization. It leads to kind of a slippery slope in society where when we are only looking to the body to provide us with the nutrients we need in terms of growth, right? And I mean, that's a bit of metaphorical, but then we start to only drive our experiential desires through the body. We're channeling everything through the body. And then again, we're only going back to this body vehicle to sustain ourselves or to excite ourselves. And this is again where we're missing the mark. We need to expand outside of just the body, because it is in and of itself a losing horse. The body is going to die. That is indisputable. The body is also going to age. So as time progresses, it doesn't matter how beautiful the body that you've been given, it is going to fail you at some point. And so you want to cultivate much than just your external experience of having a body. You want to really utilize your mind. You want to seek. You want to learn as much as you can, and certainly learn through the body. There are great lessons that you can learn through the body, and that's why you have a body. But also work on the other elements, work on service, work on utilizing the body that you have been given to create change, to create joy for others, to create systems that make this world a better place. If you are not tapping into the other aspects of the external experience and using the body as a mechanism to enact change, as an outward expression of taking what it is that's emanating from your soul and propelling it outward towards the collective, towards making a difference, then essentially you are in distortion. It's an improper use of the body. If you are completely using the body only for selfish means, only for self-gratification in ways that are fundamentally distorted, you're eventually going to end up feeling very energetically bankrupt, because you're not generating anything that is based in love or is an outward expression of love. You're basically just using the body and expecting this vehicle or this learning tool to create happiness in and of itself. It cannot do that. It can create momentary excitement, which again will fall very flat, okay? If it's not based, and if what you are doing through the body and by way of the body, if it's not done in love, by love, for the means of love, it will not create this expanded ripple effect that creates in you and by you this eternal expansion. And again, this is a difficult principle to teach, so I'm going to have to make a few videos about this. But I just want to highlight in this particular video to start paying attention to your identification with your own body. How often are you seeking validation, or running to your social media, or utilizing and calibrating your worth solely based on your body? This is something you need to adjust in terms of distorted thinking, in terms of your consciousness not being calibrated correctly. You need to move away from everything being identified as you only being a body. And once you start to identify with more than the body, with your soul, with your divine connection, with your oneness, then you won't care about the body so much. Now, you'll still, maintain it, upkeep it, everything else, but you won't suffer by it. And what I mean by this is you won't need to know if people are liking you on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. You won't need to post a million stories. You won't be constantly comparing yourself to others, because it's not a necessity. The only thing that will matter to you in each and every moment is that the outward expression of your beingness is projecting love. That will be the mainstay or the focal point of your living experience. And you will start to use the body as a tool for teaching, a tool for inspiring, a tool for helping others, and a tool for not to judge others, but to remind them of their home, to remind them of their connectedness to the divine, and to help to dispel the fear. And this is what the body's use is. If you can start to see it in this way, you can start to utilize it as this beautiful, and this is the service to others path. This is what is often described as Christ consciousness. And all this means is a very gradual adjustment from the ego self, the ego mind, back into this divinely anchored perception that really starts to discount the fact that you have a body. Now, this is not to say that some individuals don't have disassociation disorders where they've been highly abused and they're completely they're completely separating their consciousness from their bodies, and that's a totally different thing. This is, you still are very much in a body when I'm talking about the mind of oneness. You understand you have a body. You're not trying to jump out of your body. You're not trying to get out of this lifetime. You're not trying to disassociate from anything. If anything, you're more immersed in it. You just haven't bet on the body being the be all end all. You understand fundamentally that the body is a tool. It will be laid aside when we no longer need it in this particular lifetime, and that what we are is an energy. We are an energy. We have a frequency. Each and every one of us has a unique soul song or blueprint that is still connected to all that is. It's like music. You are a note within the grand symphony of eternal existence. And once you understand this, and once you understand that whether you're in a body or whether you are not in a body, you still are in that totality of existence, then you are no longer in a state of suffering. You can essentially experience life to its fullest, and not through this lens of fear that the ego has created. Because whether your body is here in time and space, or whether the body has been laid aside and you become, or you once again join with the spirit realm, it doesn't matter. It's all safe, it's all love, it's all eternal, and it's all for the learning of the divine. And you are the divine, even though you have essentially descended into this state of consciousness, this state of three-dimensional material-based time-space existence. And that's fine, that's beautiful. So again, we're not teaching that you shouldn't experience this. You are experiencing this because you decided to experience this, because the divine decided to experience this. And through this descent, a great and grand amount of wisdom is amassed. So it's not, to teach that this lowering of our vibration is somehow wrong, that is incorrect. The lowering of our vibrational state to exist in three-dimensional time-space is still a beautiful experience. It's still part of the whole. It's just that we need to adjust our perception and look through a different lens, and once again acclimate our consciousness to and with divine mind. So I'm going to wrap this up because I want to go and experience this beautiful Saturday night and have a little fun. But this is, it's a cool lesson. And once you start to integrate this into the way that you live your life, you will find that you'll have immense amount of courage. You'll speak authentically. You won't worry what other people or individuals think about you. You won't worry about what you're doing so much or how you're being perceived. You'll just simply do what you know is the highest expression of your own vibrational existence. And you'll do it with love, and you'll do it with light. And as you do this, as you exist in this way, you will lift others up around you. And what I mean by lifting them is that you will help to correct their sight. You will help them to perceive in this correctness, away from separateness, back into oneness and unification. Okay, guys, I'm going to sign off. Have a lovely rest of your weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.